Shabbat Shalom. It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Toldot. In our parasha, we really get to meet a fascinating character, both in the Tanakh and throughout Jewish history. And I'll explain. The person I'm talking about is Esav. Esav, as he's well known, is the twin brother of Yaakov. Abraham has two sons, Yitzchak and Ishmael. And Yitzchak stays on, and Ishmael in many ways is cast out. And Yitzchak has two sons, Yaakov and Esav. And the battle that goes on in this parasha is in many ways a very, very ancient battle. Who will be the firstborn son? In other words, who will be the son who will be the heir to the Abrahamic throne? To the Abrahamic ideal of monotheism, of justice, of chesed, of tzedakah, of mishpat, all of these different concepts. Who will be the heir to the Abrahamic religions? And Esav and Yaakov fight it out. Indeed, we see that before they're even born, they're in this wrestling match. The two twins are at each other's throats, literally, from the minute before they're even born. And throughout the rest of their life, they're stuck in this embrace, which is, on one hand, an embrace of brotherly love. We do see moments where the love of Esav and Yaakov shines forth. For example, in the next few parashot, we'll see in Parashat Vayishlach, when Esav and Yaakov meet up again, and they embrace, and they kiss each other, and they cry, and they missed each other. Again, quite a surprising kind of turnout for the books, but nonetheless, a little window into the love of these two brothers. And yet, most of the time, they're not really hugging, they're wrestling. There's the idea of, obviously, we find with the malach, with the angel, also in a different parasha, Parashat Vayetze, we find Yaakov wrestling, or Parashat Vayishlach, I think even, wrestling with Esav and Esav's angel, whatever that means, the malach, the representation, whether it was in a dream, whether it was in real life, different interpretations there. But either way, Yaakov and Esav are constantly wrestling over this main topic, Bechorah, who will be the chosen people, who will be the chosen son. And we find in this week's Parsha, for example, the argument on the brachot. Who will receive the bracha? Bracha is not just a blessing, as is often translated. The bracha in many ways is a mission. Who will receive the mission statement to continue Birkat Avraham, to continue the ideas, the ideology of Avraham Avinu to be the chosen people that Hashem chose? That is the battle over the Bechorah. That is the battle over the bracha. And that is the battle between Yaakov and Esav for all times. Indeed, there is a famous statement in the Midrash, Amar Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, halacha bayadua she'esav soneh liYaakov. The hatred of Esav to Yaakov is a halacha. What does halacha mean in this case? It means it's set in stone. This is deep, deep, deep stuff. It's integrated. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's a feature of this relationship. And I think as we continue on through Jewish history, this backdrop of this wrestling match between Esav and Yaakov, whenever one is up, the other is down, whenever the other one is down, the other one is up, is constantly echoing throughout the ages. We find, for example, once the Jews settle down in the land of Israel, there is this dynamic between Yisrael and Edom. The descendants of Esav, a neighboring country, Edom and Israel, have this love-hate relationship that is constantly up and down. And indeed, in this week's parasha, this week's haftarah, this week we will read the book of Ovadiah, which goes into detail into the different stories there of Esav and Yaakov, and Edom and Esav, and Israel. And indeed, when it comes to Chazal, when it comes to our rabbis, there's a lot to be said about Esav. We actually find he's one of those characters that appears a lot in Midrashim. And the question is, why? Why is there so much to say? And I think the answer is twofold. First of all, indeed, this battle of Esav and Yisrael, Esav and Yaakov, is not just a physical battle of survival. It's also a battle of religion. It's also a battle of theology. And as such, this theological battle survives even after Esav himself has passed away, and even after Yaakov has passed away, and even after Edom is no longer in the scene. The descendants of Esav, we don't even know who the descendants of Esav anymore are. Nonetheless, the ideas of Esav, and by the way, his grandson Amalek, who is a whole different discussion to have, still permeate throughout the ages. There's still a lot to talk about. So from my teachers, I learned whenever you read about Esav in a midrash, in a rabbinic source, there is always multiple layers to the interpretation of that midrash. One layer is obviously talking about the biblical character of Esav, but there's a deeper level which is talking also about the manifestation of Esav in the time of Chazal. And there's a fascinating tradition that connects between Rome and Edom, between Esav and the Roman Empire. And the rabbis, most of them, through most of the rabbinic period, were dealing with the Roman Empire, whether it's the Roman Empire that we know or its heirs, the Byzantine Empire. And very often, whenever they write about Esav, there's also hidden critiques of Rome and its power and its bloodlust and its red kind of infused living by the sword. All of this stuff is very much portrayed and in many ways projected onto the Roman Empire, and thus we see the dynamic, also the love between the Jews and the Romans. Sometimes between, we see Rebbe and Antoninus, Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, who wrote the Mishnah, and Marcus Aurelius, if I'm not mistaken, is the equivalent of Antoninus. In the Roman traditions, there seems to be, or maybe one of the later Roman empires, there seems to be a correlation, a connection between the two, and a moment of peace and harmony and working together. Hayadayim Yedei Esav V'Kol Kol Yaakov, the ability to harmonize these two, is another theme that we find in Chazal as well. But either way, when we read about Esav, there's more going on. And I would add to that and say, when it comes to the times of the Rishonim, when it comes to you come and sit down with me. Come around. When it comes to the times of the Rishonim, like the Middle Ages, the rabbis of the Middle Ages, whether it's Rashi and others like him, you want to come and say hello? Okay, Meital doesn't want to come and say hello, but she did bring me a lovely cup of orange juice. Thank you, Meital. When it comes to the Rishonim, we find very often when Rashi is referring to Esav, there's also a hidden critique, polemic against the heirs to the Roman Empire, which is the Christian Empire, the church. And by the way, the church, the heart of the church is in the Vatican, which is in Rome. The idea of the church, very much Rome turning into the Byzantine Empire, and the Christianity that comes together with the Byzantine Empire, and that turns itself into the Roman church and everything that goes along with that. When Rashi is writing about Esav, there's also a hidden critique of the church. And I think this is a great opportunity to actually learn a tiny little piece of Rashi on Esav and see how that's hiding there. When Rashi explains about Esav in our parasha, it says Yodei Tzayid, that Esav was a hunter, and he says that he would hunt his father. Latzud aviv ve'leramoto, he would cheat his father. Sho'alo he'ach me'asrim hamelach ve'ateven, he would say, how can I take trumot and ma'asrot from salt, from all sorts of straw and stuff like that. Savur aviv shemedakdek mitzvot. He was pretending to be holy and incredibly, intellectually astute to the dynamics of halakha, and trying to pretend to be holier than thou, holier than he actually was, and more interested in morality and halakha and so on and so forth. And Rashi, I think here very beautifully, is giving a very hidden, and again, this might be my interpretation of Rashi, but giving a hidden critique of the church, saying you pretend to be this, place of worship and of holiness and of love, the religion of love and acceptance, but really it's all a facade. And really you are the crusades that happen at during Rashi's time, and all of your love is worth nothing if you're butchering people in the streets, and if you're all about money and corruption and power. And I think here again there's a little slight polemic against the Esav of his time, where Rashi is kind of building that into, based on previous midrashim, but building that into the history of Yaakov and Esav. So here we find a little connection, and I just want to add one small little thought. which is actually about the dynamic between us and Esav today. Most of our struggles today are with Yishmael, with Ishmael and his descendants, the Arabs. There's a lot to talk about there. But actually, I would actually argue that a bigger threat, ideologically, to Judaism is actually Christianity. Now, Christianity comes in multiple different forms. There are plenty of Christians that are amazing, Ohavei Israel, big supporters of Israel, especially the evangelical communities in America and around the world. There are plenty of Christians who are big lovers of Yaakov, of Israel. And we see here a hint to that loving embrace, that ability to work together between Yaakov and Esav. But there's also, I would even argue, the majority of Christians around the world. And if you actually look to the Christian sources, it's actually probably the most simple reading of the Christian sources. The New Testament and a lot of the early church fathers are incredibly anti-Semitic, incredibly anti-Israel. In many ways, they are the replacement theory that God has abandoned the Jews, he has abandoned the old covenant, and he has made a new covenant with the non-Jewish world, with humanity. And in many ways, the new Jews, the new Israelites, are the Christians. This is explicit in multiple different places in the Christian sources. And I just want to mention, this came across my feed this morning, interestingly enough, about the Black Israelites of the United States. I don't know if you've heard about them, a group of Christians who claim that they are the true Jews, that really the Jewish tribes, the lost tribes, went to Africa and they were then sold as slaves to the Americas, and so all of the blacks are actually the real Jews, and the Jews that they see in the streets of New York are actually imposters, and that Israel is an imposter, and it's the synagogue of Satan, and so on and so forth. This crazy cult is actually these days nearly 5 million strong in the United States alone. And just so we realize the strength of, there's nearly as many fake Jews as there are real Jews in the United States. Christianity has a lot that it still needs to work through when it comes to the Jewish people. And I am nervous about the future of Jewish-Christian relations, especially because there's a lot of baggage that needs to be unpacked. This battle of the Bechorah, who is the true continuation of the Abrahamic monotheistic tradition, who are the true Jews, a battle we, by the way, have with Ishmael as well, with the Arabs, with the Muslims. Was it Ishmael at the Akedah, or was it Yitzchak at the Akedah? Again, the Quran is another one of these fake Judaisms. But either way, this battle is not over. And it's a great opportunity to read the parasha and to analyze, wow, all of these concepts, this battle between Esav and Yaakov that we find in the verses is actually echoing down throughout the ages. And even in 2024, this is still very much part of this battle. And let's hope that we come to moments of harmony and we bring forth that unity between Esav and Yaakov and are able to, in many ways, build an alliance that betters humanity, that betters the world. And Bezrat Hashem, we will succeed in that in the future. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. I hope you have an amazing week. And Bezrat Hashem, may we continue to bring out the best, both in Esav and in ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.